Our next topic is the founder story. So actually get ready now for an inside look into the wild world of early stage selling. With us is Vedran from Trebble. And funny story about Trebble, it's a Corona baby. So it's a pretty young company. And let's hear from Vedran. One big applause for Vedran.
Thank you, thank you. Apparently, you and I know each other for 20 years. We've discussed that. She was an early user of one of my previous companies that luckily didn't have anything to do with sales. Cool, so we are strapped on time, so I'm going to try to do this as fast as possible. But let's try to figure out what we're actually going to do. I need to do something with this? Yep, there we go. Let me give you some context before we actually start talking about sales. So I usually actually do sales, tech talks. I'm an engineer by background, so I've got 15 years of experience in tech. At the moment, I am a CEO of Treblle, but I like to say that I'm a backup engineer, and still I like to get my feet wet with development. This is my second company, so the first one was bootstrapped. This one is VC-backed, so you could say I tried both. We can talk later which one is better. It really depends on where you are in life and what you kind of want to do. But again, this is a sales conference. I hated sales to a degree. I still do. I guess I'm more comfortable than I was. I now see it more of a challenge than a problem. But let's see what I've learned. So to give you some context on what we actually do, a little riddle. What do you use every day but don't know it? And of course, the answer is APIs. So the technical explanation is APIs are like these programming interfaces used to communicate information back and forth between a database and a client. A less fancy way to say this, every time you take an Instagram photo, that's an API call. Every time you add somebody to a CRM, every time you friend somebody on LinkedIn, all of these are LinkedIn calls. So you might be wondering who's even using APIs. And just to give you a picture of the scale, here are some of the companies that we try to sell to and the number of APIs that they have. So again, these guys have really, really big landscapes. We're talking about north of 1,000 APIs, whereas basically most of the startups here probably have maybe 5 to 10 APIs. So it's radically, radically different than what you're used to. Now, what we do at Treblle is we help organizations figure out their APIs, meaning we actually tell them what's going on. We've got a suite of products that range everywhere from observability, security, AI, cataloging, all of these different things that help them actually figure things out. Everything's completely automated, super easy to use, but again, you're going to come to learn that none of this matters, which is what we're going to discuss soon. Who do we usually sell to? So we started bottom up, and we have about 190,000 users, fancy word, API professionals. We do process around 3 billion API requests per month, and some of our customers include Walmart, AstraZeneca, NG, National Netherlands, JP Morgan, IA Financial Group, and a bunch of these guys. But also, at the end, the last guy there, Elevian, that's a Croatian startup that's actually paying us. So really happy that we have the Croatian customer. They're always the most demanding one to get. But let's focus a bit more on sales. So we have a channel that when I founded the company in 2021, I called it To the Moon. And the most common terms that we use there are all of the ones that you see. Basically, that's what I would say early stage sales looks like, but we're going to focus on the last one, which is why. And I think that's predominantly the number one question that you would hear and get in the channel is why. Why did they say no? Why did it pass? Why did they do this? Why did they do that? So I've kind of distilled it into 5 things that we've kind of noticed when selling. And the first one, and I think somebody here, there was a talk early on about founder-led sales, and I definitely agree with that. It is the only way to sell when you are in early stage startup or company, it doesn't really matter. And of course, the greatest salesman that ever lived. But why is it that the founder needs to sell? So number one, it's very simple, and this isn't a brag. Unfortunately, founders seem to handle rejection better than anybody else. And the amount of rejection that you will get is incredible. Like, I've been rejected, but I thought I was rejected by girls when I was younger. I thought I was rejected by a lot of different things. But the amount of no and the amount of negative energy and the amount of people telling you, no, this is not going to succeed. No, you're not going to sell. No, the product sucks. No, you're not going to be able to do that. You're not going to be able to do this is incredible. And I've seen even people within our company, you know, it's natural that you get affected with that, but basically at the end of the day, it's your job as a founder to basically push through all of these different situations. And I think it's not fair to the salespeople, SDRs or A's, to actually have to go through all of this while you're trying to figure out what the product is, how it should look like, and everything else. That brings us to the second point. When I started the company, we did hire after about a year and a half, I did hire somebody for sales, and it was more of a, you know, he's like an everything guy, but also does sales. And he's like, you know, tell me what we're selling. And basically, you know, the answer is, I don't know yet. I think we kind of have a few customers that are paying for this, but I think that's not enough money and that's not enough product. So basically, the only person that actually knows what the product can do and, you know, how much you can stretch the imagination of the product is the founder. Generally, of course, everything is possible in tech, but if you overpromise and underdeliver, you're not going to close that deal. And this is something that we see often in a lot of early stage companies, even when we like try to use a lot of AI software to do sales for us. And when I go to their website, everything is like amazing, but when you plug it in, nothing works. The last thing, and this is something that I've observed myself, like I've sent a lot of people on sales calls, product people, marketing people, salespeople, and none of them can understand the signals and sentences that these guys use and cross-connect them with 5 other different calls that you had this week and 5 other internal conversations that you had this week around the product, which essentially puts you in a much better position to basically understand what is it that you're gonna fucking build that's going to help you sell this. So those are the 3 things when it comes to founder-led sales and why that's a must. Thank you. Let's move on to the second thing that we've noticed when it comes to early stage sales, and that is value. So unfortunately, one of the things that I had to admit to myself is, and I even talked to some other folks about this here, if you're not adding value, you're not selling, and the definition of value is really subjective sometimes, especially to somebody who did found a company. So again, typical meme, value, no, it's Dan from sales, usually how that goes. But there are 3 things that I wanted to highlight here. I think the modern buyer, I hate this word, but people use that word. The modern buyer is a bit smarter than we think. They've all been burned on a bunch of software that's sitting in their enterprise company or somewhere else, not doing anything, not being used by anybody. So essentially, they are much savvier when they're buying software. They want to make sure that this is actually going to work out. You need to have an onboarding plan. If you're talking about one of the companies that I mentioned before, for example, NN Group, the largest insurance company in Netherlands, they have about 15,000 employees. 8,000 employees have to be onboarded onto our platform. You know, the number one question that we got is, great, we're going to buy the software, but how will you onboard 8,000 developers? Do you have videos? Do you have documentation? Will somebody come to our office, et cetera, et cetera? So, you know, the decision making is radically different. The second thing, I think, and this is a problem that we actually had when we originally built the product that I started about 3 years ago, it added value, but only to me. Okay, it was very valuable to us, to our use case that we had at the time, But when we started basically trying to figure out, hey, why aren't people jumping to pay for this? It turns out the definition of value to them was radically different than what it is to us. So the only actual way to figure that out is to basically iterate through a bunch of different products, a bunch of different iterations of value and the definition of value before you hit that. And one tip that we started doing is we had problem defining value to across the company, product, sales, marketing. Of course, you can't bring 20 people on a sales call, people get scared. So we started religiously recording everything and sharing on Slack and basically providing summaries, and people started watching these videos internally and started understanding, hey, okay, this is what the customer perceives as value, we need to build that. This is my role, I need to do it like this, like that, etc., etc. So it actually helps if you share this and be fully transparent. And the last thing, when it comes to delivering value and why a lot of these enterprise companies buy, it's not just the product. Unfortunately, the definition of the product seems to be your product and the entire company, right? So if you think about, why would Walmart buy Trebble? Walmart has like, I don't know, 2 million employees. I don't know how much revenue. We're a 20% startup predominantly from Zagreb. And, you have to have not just a good product, but you have to have all the accompanying things, all the security certification, all the documentation, all the answers, all the trust. You saw AstraZeneca was one of our customers. We almost lost that sales because when we started talking to them, they asked us, hey, do you guys support an API gateway? It's a very technical term, doesn't matter. Do you support this? We're like, yeah, we support it. And they're like, we went to your documentation website and it's not documented there. You have more than 50 other integrations. Why isn't it documented? So these are the things that we sometimes run into. But basically, it's not just the product or the software you sell. It's actually the whole kind of package that you have. The next thing that I think a good early stage team should have is process. Even though if you told me this 3 years ago, I would probably tell you, go fuck yourself. I'm not a big believer in process, but it does help. And here are the 3 things that we've kind of figured out are very important. By the way, it took us about 3 years to figure out some of these things. Again, I'm new to sales, so forgive me, but maybe some of these things will be helpful. Number 1, discovery. For me, I think this is the most important stage in sales. The more I learn about it, the more I see the impact it has. Every deal that slipped a quarter, a month, 2 months, or 3 months happened because we did poor discovery. Every deal that ended up being dead was because we did poor discovery. And we started doing this religiously, and we've seen a lot of improvement. So we try to figure out a couple of key important things. Is there an actual need for the product? Do we actually fit? Is there a need now? Because if there's a need 6 months from now, unfortunately, this isn't a good fit because I need to bring revenue this quarter, right? So we can talk in 6 months, but not now. Secondly, we try to figure out, is there budget? Who holds the budget? Are we talking to that person? Is that person like a champion, an influencer, whatever it is? So we try to understand what is the what's the roadmap of us actually selling? Who needs to sign up? Who is that end person when we shake hands and basically give a demo? Who needs to give their blessing? So if you do all of these, basically you have a much smoother ride than otherwise you would have. This is a trick that we started doing. I mean, not a trick. There's a book about it. It's something about influencing people. I should know. I read it, but it's not the one, the most popular one. It's a different one. But basically, the book says if you try to get smaller commitments from people, doesn't applicable to anything, it's more likely that they will actually commit to a larger thing at the end. So we started breaking down commitment into smaller stages. One of the biggest stages for us is a POC. We know that when we actually ship our product on their private cloud or on-prem and they see their own data, it's a bit weird, but that's what everybody likes. That is when they actually see the value. Yes, they can see the value on our cloud product, but for some reason, they really want to see it on their own data. So in order to get a POC up and running, for us, in order to deploy that, takes some time, but most importantly, it's a risk because we still don't know if they're going to buy. We need to spend resources, blah, blah, blah. So we came up with some kind of it's not a contract. We call it a project overview, where we define the steps of who's going to do what in which time period. This is the most crucial point. Usually we say it's 4 weeks. We define weekly check-ins, everything in the document, and we simply ask the decision maker to sign it. It's not a legally binding document. It's just basically an overview of what we're going to do from our side and their side, and he's just agreeing to do that. We can't actually sue the guy. You know, we're still going to lose time, but if we get that commitment, 80% of the time, it goes through. So getting those smaller wins as early as possible kind of makes a difference. The last thing, we actually open the sales process to the customer, and we tell them, here's how this looks for us. Here are the steps. Here is what we need. Here is when we will be happy. Tell us what makes you happy. You know, how does success look like? What are those metrics? What do you want us to do? And we align on that. Again, we put that into that non-legally binding document, but it actually works. They know what they can expect. They know who they will be dealing with. Everything is laid out up front and makes the entire process a bit easier. And since we started doing this, especially the second one and the first one a bit better, I think our improvement rate went from, like, I don't know, 10% to 50% more POCs, and then even more closed deals. So again, I hate processes, but they actually work. Next, something that I also didn't even know that was a thing or that important is, I think most early stage startups are actually badly positioned, and that is what, for at least about 1.5 years, killed most of our sales. So again, an example, if you saw this ad, LinkedIn, and it just says connect with people for no reason, you would probably not do that. But again, as we know, there is some value. People actually connect with other people on LinkedIn. So number one, people don't buy what they don't understand. I kind of expected whenever we go into a sale and we're talking to a company like the world's biggest banks or insurance companies or retail groups, whatever, that on the other side of, you know, the mic, or you would have somebody who actually is an expert on what they do. That's not usually the case. Most of the time, these guys are way below their pay grade and you know, don't necessarily understand, especially if you have a complex product. Most people are actually used to buying products that solve one single problem. So if I'm searching for something, I have a problem, I want a solution for the problem. If your product solves that problem and 10 other problems, I'm now confused. Why is it the same product? Why is it not 10 products, right? So we had to deal a lot because we solve horizontally across the API lifecycle a lot of different problems for a lot of different teams. We had to basically learn to oversimplify things for a lot of these customers and specifically hone in on one single problem. So I'll give you a couple of examples. I won't name the company, but there's a bank that probably, you know, transacts a lot of transactions a month. They bought an entire product that we have that spans across 8 to 10 different products, 8 to 10 different stages, just because of one single feature. Literally, that was their decision-making process. That's what they wanted. We you know, great, but predominantly they use that one single feature. So we had to, you know, a year ago, we would pitch them the entire product, we would show them the entire demo, we would go through all of these different steps when, in fact, the only thing that they wanted is that one single a single thing. Second problem with positioning is people don't actually read. You know, we've kind of learned this also the hard way, but whatever you have on your website, whatever you have on any of your materials, most people won't read 90% of it. They skim it. And one thing that they do skim for are keywords, right? So I have a problem, I'm looking for the exact keyword that I have in my head. Is it here? It's not, I don't give a fuck, right? So a lot of these situations were because we simply didn't know what keywords they were using. And what's even worse is when it comes to like terminology, a lot of these big companies have their own terminology for a lot of different things. So something that we would call an API, they would call an endpoint, just for an example. Everybody who's technical will understand, but basically you have to not just make sure that you're positioning the product and the company correctly, you have to do it in a way where it resonates with a lot of the things that they're using. So for example, financial banking guys, these guys want to see a lot of security stuff. Retail guys want to see a lot of customer stuff, et cetera, et cetera. So all of these have different things. And the last thing that I think is quite important and quite confusing, and is still confusing to me, is a lot of early stage startups are simply brandless, meaning there is no brand that you can lean on. And you know, probably everybody who knows Apple recognizes the old Apple logo. Well, you know, if you go ask the TikTok generation, I bet you nobody would tell you that this is Apple that they know today. They know the shiny logo, they know the iPhone, and that's what they care for. But basically, if you are in early stages, one thing that you cannot buy with money is brand. It doesn't matter if you have 100 million, billion, or 50K, you cannot buy brand because a brand is a feeling, right? And it takes time to develop a feeling. You can borrow trust. So one thing that to a degree works is you can partner with somebody that's bigger than you, that can bring in some potential logos or customers, but that only works if you're ready. Like we've been in situations where we had a successful collaboration with some kind of a US company. They were very popular at the time. We onboarded like a lot of users from them, but we weren't ready, right? And we lost a lot of credibility there. What I mean by ready, we didn't know how to scale them, we didn't know how to service them, we didn't know any of that. So basically, we lost more than we gained because we simply were not ready. The product was not there, the value was not there, we were not there. So that's also something that, you know, tread lightly. Unfortunately, one of the things that in early stages you just have to do, and it comes back to founder-led sales. If you are doing founder-led sales, which again, as I mentioned, is the only way to go, you need to become an expert and not just a seller. So we've been in situations where, you know, somebody from my team reaches out, no answer, I reach out, there is an answer, right? Because somebody saw me on LinkedIn, saw me give a talk on a conference, not about sales, but actually about tech, et cetera, et cetera. So the more you expose yourself in front of the correct crowd, the more likely people will trust you, because at the end of the day, the entire thing with the brand and why it's hard to buy it is that, you know, people need to trust and feel that you are credible. Otherwise, they're not buying. And the last thing, a lot of times we try to measure, you know, can we measure brand value? If we do this, how do we measure it? You know, can we put it on a dashboard? You can't actually put it on a dashboard. It's not a fixed timeline. That's the biggest problem, I think, with something that we try to do every day when it comes to sales and marketing. Everybody's saying, hey, if we were a bigger brand, people would come to the website more, they would buy more. Yeah, great, but you know, how do you actually measure that? Every time we go to a conference, that creates brands. Can we go to 1,000 conferences a year? No, so it's gonna take us some time. So that's something that you actually have to build and shape, and basically comes back to the fact that, you know, there are some things that you can speed up, hack when it comes to early stage sales, but this is definitely one of the last things that you can't do. I think to close it off, one thing that's, I think, challenging about early stage sales is not a lot of people are willing to go through the pain and the process of getting so many no's. A lot of people get scared. Like we've had sales guys that hear 10 no's and they get scared that it's a product problem. And then they, doubt the product and they can't sell anymore, et cetera, et cetera. So it's like this vicious feedback loop where if you're not used to it and you can't understand, hey, okay, the product is this today, but we can actually change it tomorrow, and we're working at that. If you're not used to that, if your mindset is not there, you're essentially going to be screwed. So be prepared for a lot of no's. Be prepared to do a lot of heavy lifting if you're the founder. Some things will inevitably take time. But the good thing, and one thing that I've learned about sales, is that you could pick it up. Even a guy like me can pick it up, and there are really people who know a lot more and can give you tips and tricks. The last thing that I want to note is, I think sales is an ever-changing game. When we started doing it in 2021, it was radically different than what it was today. Give you an example. If you go to, I don't know, JP Morgan today, no developer can make a single decision. If you go to JP Morgan in 2021, they could do whatever the fuck they want. So, the target is no longer the developer, but actually somebody who has more power. Or, cold emailing used to work in 2020. Now there's so many cold emails that doesn't make any sense, right? So you constantly need to be trying out different channels and trying out different propositions where your value will work. And the last thing, at the end of the day, if you aren't selling and you've tried everything, try to figure out what the value is. Either you're not positioning the value to the correct people or you don't have value. Either way, everything is good. You just need to know which one you need to work on. That's about it. Thank you. We were actually on time.
We have time for questions, so questions? Oh, super. Who was the first one? I didn't. Okay.
Okay, great presentation. So I have a question about the customer, how did you call it? Discovery, yeah.
Yeah, discovery calls.
So can you share details, how exactly does that look like? So how many touch points, meetings do you need to find everything you need to see if this is a good fit?
One, we literally come on, if we get a lead nowadays, we literally come on board 30 minutes usually, and literally ask all the questions that we want. We're asking the person, do you have the budget? No. Who holds the budget? This guy. Can you bring him in? No. That's it. If he can bring him in, then we say, okay, let's bring that guy in. Let's talk to him. If he tells us that there is budget, that it fulfills everything, then we go to a demo. We don't do demos anymore until we figure out it's actually worth it. So we actually really, really question that person openly, on all of these different things, who is going to see value? What is the value? What is the problem that you're trying to solve? What is your timeline? How much does procurement usually last? All of these different things. The more questions you ask, the easier it is to understand, are you speaking to the right person? I'll give you a couple of examples. We've had great champions, people who, brought us to the end of the deal, but we also had people who, when you look at them and see them and the way that they talk and dress, you would think that they'd be able to get something done. At the end of the day, they can't even talk to their boss about getting 35K for a deal like this, or let alone 100 or 500K for a deal of this size. So we ask all the questions that we care about before we even start moving on to the next stage. It's just a time saver for you and everybody else.
You gotta send me the questions. So.
I will.
I want to hear one tip from your side. What if a founder doesn't want to sell?
Don't be a founder. I didn't want to sell, but here I am giving a presentation about selling. There you go. I've come full circle. But all jokes aside, the more I do this, the more I think it's impossible, because unless you have a co-founder that is actually, you know, willing to do the selling maybe, and is as passionate about the product as you are. But again, I don't think you can hire, and I think there was somebody else talking about this earlier, I don't think you can hire anybody who's going to do that sale. The first, I don't know, it doesn't matter how many. It really depends on the product, the person, the company, who you're selling to. But whatever that number of initial sales is, nobody can do it except you. So yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Vedran.